Why We Bleep is sponsored by Signal Sounds. Lockdown day 397. In an effort to stave off total insanity, I've drawn a face on my modular synthesizer, and I've been treating them as a person for the last 3 months. Tarvulin 9000, as I refer to them, is my friend, confidant, and occasional lover. Tarvulin is a demanding companion, though, and has been requesting keepsakes of my affection from Signal Sounds on a near weekly basis. A booklet easel command is now Tarvulin's, along with a brand new IntelliJ Metropolix and regular missives sealed with a loving kiss on James Sigler's Patch the Card Game cards. They're like Brian Eno's oblique strategies, but for your modular, Tarvulin says, before giving me a little zap of CV, which is like a kiss, only quite painful. Oh well, anything for my Tarvi. Thank God for Signal Sound's speedy delivery. So, to appease the inanimate objects that in your crushing loneliness have begun to take on sentient forms and make demands of you, head your mouse over to signalsounds.com. That website again is signalsounds.com. Why? Oh, heck. It's that time again. It's Tom Whitwell o'clock, and I'm buying. Yes, friends, this means it's been 4 years of bleeping. Well, the bleep is entering its 4th year of life in February, which is a strange kind of January, but that's just the way of it sometimes. It has been difficult to finish projects, it appears, of late. And that's probably the theme of this conversation, if there was one, because Tom has been very, very busy, but unfortunately, as you probably noticed, has not been able to release a number of things which we talked about last year. And we talk about that. Yes, we're all feeling the pinch a little bit, none more than Tom, but he's doing his best, dang it. And this and many other things that are always, whenever you talk to Tom, there are always interesting things that come up. He is a worldly man, interested in all manner of different aspects, and this conversation is no different. It's full of odd, interesting things that you may wish to investigate further. Not least, actually, for the first time, we talk about Tom's day job. He is a management consultant, which sounds sort of a bit weird and boring, but is actually very, very fascinating because he has to go into companies and get under their skin and work out what they really need when they don't even necessarily know what that is. And it relates directly to the whole thing of designing products, although ironically, Tom goes about designing products in almost the opposite manner. And we talk about, not finishing projects, the importance of meeting people and seeing people, which we've had to do in a very different way, and ask the essential question, is Eurorack boring? Spoiler alert, no, it's not. We talk about making digital devices that are unique. We talk about possible future Turing machines and modules in general, the problems with Spotify, and Tom talks about his experiences with the spooky Soma Ether, which is a very interesting device. The Soma Ether is the Soma's sort of weird radio receiver thing with kind of antenna prongs where you can kind of point it at inanimate objects and you hear sound from them, which is probably something that is worth doing with Tarvulin 9000. It'd probably tell you a thing or two if you put that close to them. But that is a very fascinating device. And actually, I subsequently purchased one. But I'll talk more about that later. I think first, though, we're going to have one more advert. An interesting ad from an excellent company. And then we're going to chat to Tom. So, what's that ad? Why We Bleep is also sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community for creative and curious people like you. Offering thousands of inspiring video-based classes on topics as varied as illustration to graphic design, music production, animation, writing, film and video productivity. The list, it is long, but the classes are short under 60 minutes in most cases, with lessons to fit any schedule. I've been watching Productivity for Creatives, Build a System that Brings Out Your Best by a chap called Thomas Frank. The principle of this class is that inspiration isn't a muse, it's a muscle. He has some key points regarding removing friction from the process of making things, be it videos, musics, what have you, including the 20-second rule, which really reminds me of what BT said about his modular. Make it so that it doesn't take more than 20 seconds to be able to do something that you know you need to do more of. If it takes more than 20, you're less likely to do it. I'm looking at my half-disconnected studio that I've hardly recorded anything in ages and thinking, Thomas has a point. If you're interested in learning things, check out Skillshare. And Skillshare is also extremely affordable at less than $10 a month with a yearly subscription. But I have a deal for you. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. Click the link and get yourself some free learning. And with that, it is time to commence the podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Whitwell, Mark IV.
I've definitely been feeling that things not finishing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got lots of things I've started. I've got lots of things I've made some progress with. But actually getting things properly finished and out the door has probably not been as effective as it might have been. Which obviously we can blame COVID for that.
I think a lot of people have been saying that you should be excused for not being productive during COVID. I think that's especially true if you have children.
Yes.
Especially true if your children are supposed to be in school.
Yeah.
Is that you?
No, so mine are teenagers. So mine are 15 and 17. So they're fine. They're kind of...
Well, surely a 15-year-old's supposed to be going to school, or is...
Yes, they're going to school, but their going to school consists of sitting in their room on a laptop doing stuff. You know, I don't need to sort of stand, or there would be no value in me standing behind them and telling them what to do. That wouldn't be helpful. So I don't have the sort of childcare horror that so many people have had this year. I mean, it's been, I don't know what your sort of work has been like, but it has been quite amazing having the kind of, you know, we do these big Zoom sessions where kind of 50 people from Flux where I work are all kind of talking, well, not all talking at once, but everyone's face is up there. And there are bits of that where it does feel like you probably see people's faces more often than you would have done previously. You know, it would have been in the past that somebody might be working on a project for months on end, or you'd be on a project and you just wouldn't bump into them in the office or whatever. And so there have been bits where it's felt a little bit, you know, it's felt more close and more connected than it might do. But I think that's a very, very specific type of company that I now work for that probably certainly isn't the experience for most people, I don't think.
What do you actually do?
I am a management consultant. I can say that now after doing it for 5 years.
You feel comfortable saying it at this point, or you've come to peace with it?
Yeah, so we sort of, you know, I will go and work for a company like, a lot of this year I was working for The Economist, and The Economist are trying to do something new and interesting, and me and a couple of other people from Flux will go in and work with a team from them, and we will make that thing together, and we will test it, and we will do experiments, and we will make progress on it. And so we do that for lots of different random companies. It's they will have an idea for a product, and we'll help them figure out what it might be, how can they do it. Often it's how can they either decide what the product should be or decide how do you decide if it is a good idea. So we did stuff for a bank where they had an idea for a thing, for a new kind of bank account or whatever. They'd done loads of focus groups, and in the focus groups everyone said, oh, that'd be great, I'd love that. But they were a bit paranoid after previous experiences that might not actually be real. So we did a bunch of little experiments where we created a kind of version of this that people could buy, and to find out if people actually will buy it, if they do really want it, or they're just saying that in meetings.
Is that a thing?
The most famous, and I'm sure apocryphal story, is when Sony were introducing a Walkman back in the olden days, and the big thing with this particular Walkman was that it was going to be available in different colours. So they'd have like a black one and a red one and a blue one and a green one and a yellow one, whatever. And they had a focus group and they showed this to people, and everyone in the group said, "This is great. It's really good. It's so boring that Walkman, why are they all black or silver? It's brilliant. You've done this. This is really, really good idea." And at the end of the session, they said, to say thank you for being part of this session, we're going to give you one of these Walkmans to take away. Which color would you like? And everyone picked up the black one and walked out. And what people say and what people, I mean, we see this as well, where if you present a new idea, a new instrument, a new module, whatever, it's very easy, and I would do this myself as well. I'm not saying I wouldn't do this, but you look at it and you can say, oh, it would be great if it could do this. Oh, there's an interesting thing that it could do that would be like this. Here's a feature that would be, why can't it do this? And then you put those things in, and then when they go out, you get a very strong impression that nobody is using that feature, nobody is using that part of it, and they're using it in a different way. They don't. It's not they're lying; it's they don't know how they would use it because they haven't got it. So that's, I think, that's the sort of real thing that we do, is asking people what they think is just never terribly enlightening, because how would they know? How would they possibly know? How would they know even until they've actually gone in and spent the money? And then even then, how would they know whether they're going to want that and use it and keep it, or whether they're going to get it home and go, this is cool, and then sell it to somebody, weeks later? And you can ask people and they can tell you, but the things they tell you aren't necessarily terribly useful or enlightening. What you can do is talk to people about what they do, what they're trying to do, how they use other devices, how they work. You can watch people work. I think it's particularly interesting when you kind of listen to the sort of frustrations of people who are playing live and that kind of thing. And that can be really interesting, because then you are getting genuine information. But it's then for you as the designer to go and figure out what the solution is. And then asking the person whether you think that's the right solution may well, again, not be terribly useful until they actually have it in their hands, until they've learnt it, until they've had a go with it, until they've compared it with other competitors, whatever it is. It's quite hard for them to be able to give you very useful feedback on whether that is something that they want or something that's useful. What you want to do is absolutely give people what they want. You want to absolutely give people things that people enjoy and people value and people buy and people, come back to and use. But doing that by asking people what they want is not necessarily the most effective thing, because they don't know. It's not that they're lying or they're being disingenuous. It's just how could they know, because they haven't got the thing.
I keep thinking of a certain company throughout everything that you're saying in terms of the process of just asking people what they want. Also, the process of making multiple colours of things is an interesting one. I can't help
but we're not going to talk about that company today.
Well, we aren't going to talk about the company. No. I only note that there are 10 different coloured 606s. Astonishing. I don't know which. Were I not boycotting everything that company does, then I don't know if I would. I don't think I would buy it. I might buy a tangerine or a.
You wait. They'll do them with transparent plastic covers, and we'll all buy them, because that'd be so cool.
I mean, that would just clear, like the
clear
prison,
plastic. Exactly,
like prison devices. Yeah, I watched the Tech Moan.
Oh, okay.
He did a whole thing about prison, because prison equipment, prison sort of consumer electronics have to be shipped in clear plastic outers. So you get TVs and you can look inside, you can see the CRT, and
that's so cool.
And like tape decks, CD players, typewriters.
They have
typewriters.
clear typewriters that I've seen for prisons because they obviously make them typewrite things so they can then charge them hundreds of dollars for a typewriter.
Yeah, exactly. It's and he obviously was interested in that tech, and I think a lot of the stuff is kind of up till very recently. There were still, I mean, obviously cassettes are still a thing, but cassettes were particularly a thing in prisons because you were able to get cassettes where you were able to get cassette players where you weren't necessarily able to get like computers and MP3 players. I think that is changing a little bit, but it's there's sort of still an industry. Like you had 808s and Heartbreak or something on cassette, I think, and it was a clear version. I'm sure that was, unless I'm misremembering. But it isn't, the sort of notion of what you do as your job seems to basically, you're a bit like, you remind me of James Carruthers in that sense. I believe he's still, Mr. Nobots. That's his job as well. He
does exactly the same sort of thing as me.
He does.
Yeah.
And I've talked to him endlessly about it, but I'm never sure if it's exactly the same thing. But it is, and it makes sense. Why wouldn't you... For James, I talked to him and he's like, I'm not really a musician, but there's no reason why I can't design a musical instrument because it's just the same thing that I do in my professional work. Every day you're coming to a new industry and you're having to sort of from the ground up, presumably, yes, you have worked in magazines in the past, but not necessarily The Economist. So it's your job, obviously, to sort of get into another world, get under their skin and then tell them or show them what they want. But you don't design Eurorack modules this way. You don't go and
I was going to say when you were talking about James, I definitely do not do that myself. I'm much more sort of self-indulgent and much more kind of, I reckon something like this will be interesting, so I'm going to make it.
Is this kind of like, it's almost like a relief for you? It's like a way of being naughty.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, it's certainly a much more, it's a very different way of doing it. And I think that's why I often have that point where I come up with something and then I go to Steve Thonk and say, I've made this thing, do you think anyone's going to want it? And that's a very genuine question. And I'm very, and there have definitely been things where he will say, oh yeah, I think this is going to be great. And we'll make 250 of them or something. And I'll say, I'm really not sure this is the thing. Let's do 150 first or 100 first and see if anyone really wants it. And I'm very uncertain about what things people will be excited by and what things they won't be excited by.
You mean that you're feeling out of touch?
Yeah.
That's the what's the LCD sound system?
Losing my
edge.
Kids.
You're losing your edge, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
The kids are actually really, really nice. We haven't had shows, have we? So the shows are surely your litmus test, where you go and speak to the people and say, "What do you want?"
Well, it's going. I
they
definitely
say a faster
think
horse.
It's definitely. It's not speaking to them, but it's definitely. I have really missed just. You just meet interesting, weird people at those events. Whether it's a super booth or a CV Freaks or whatever it is. You just wander around and you meet people who have different ways of looking at the world or using things in different ways or whatever that is, and there is a real bit of kind of inspiration there that I think is, I've missed much more than I thought I would. I think that it's the randomness. It's the sort of, you always meet weird people with weird backgrounds who have weird jobs and do weird things at those events, and that's really interesting. That's really kind of, definitely been missing that this year.
There are things that come of shows as well. I mean, I can think of literally 2 examples sat here of like the new Micro Freak oscillators from Noise Engineering.
Oh yeah,
that came because Sebastian and JB from Arturia just went and talked to Noise Engineering at NAMM in 2019, and they were like, "You should do some oscillators," and it's actually finally out. Yeah, and then I was talking to Soundforce, Nicholas at Soundforce. I was looking at all his controls. I was like, "You should do a Jupiter 8 one," and he's making it. So it's true, like things do come out of shows, which I think is like, and I work in the industry where we go and do shows and you're often, you always question, is this worthwhile? And it's never also, a clear thing, because it's not about a lot of the time it's not about like, did we sell lots of gear when we were there? Did we ensure that we sold things? And there's a kind of intangible quality to those things where you just have lots of conversations with people and you try and get people inspired, and you listen to customers and you get a sense of what people are excited by and interested in. And that definitely changes, for I talk to people, and unlike, for example, the we started doing this just as COVID hit, but the Hydrasynth, the ASM Hydrasynth, and I took that to the show at Fabric. There was this show there, like in January, I think. And it was by far and away, it was the thing that everyone was like, this is the best thing I've seen at this show. Yeah. This is the most amazing thing ever. And it's sort of that certitude, it helps you understand what is successful about a product, and that, well, in this sense, very simplistically, it just helps you understand that there's nothing wrong with the product, and so that you then you put your efforts into promoting it and getting that reaction from people by just showing them it working.
Yes.
And we don't really have that. There's no feedback at all if you don't have shows. And there are internet comments, but obviously a lot of the time...
That's very, very different, yeah.
Yeah, and they don't comment if... It's like complaints, like people don't leave... People do leave positive comments a lot, but they don't always. And people love leaving negative comments. Just like a very recent example, I did a edit of some jams from a BeatStep Pro video I did 5 years ago. And it was given to Arturia, and they ran an ad. And that ad had just an absolute wall-to-wall panning of the video. Literally every single comment was like, this is not music, could have pulled better music out my bum, who are these people, what is going on, this is unbelievable, this just melted my mind, I want to stick pins in my ears, like wall-to-wall bad. Which is somewhat unusual, especially also since the original video really has good comments. There were a couple of people who were like, this music is terrible on the original video, but not that many. And so this teaches me that basically people need some padding to tolerate my weird-ass jams. But also it's the fact was that all the negative feedback made the video perform really well. And it reminded me of the last conversation we had where you talked about shit posting. Yes. The Conservative Party having like Comic Sans adverts. Yeah. Because I started thinking I might start doing some Comic Sans videos. That's basically what I'd done there, clearly, in people's eyes. But it did really well. But I don't know. The point is the feedback is valuable.
I think it's also with the events, it's I think there's one thing is seeing those events as marketing and seeing them as a business event. But I for me, it's just the value is that just meeting random people. Also, there's something about demoing things to people and just seeing literally how they physically use a thing. Which knobs do they touch, which knobs don't they touch, that sort of thing. That can be really, really valuable, I think, as well. And it's very hard to get that from any other source, I think. I also like something like Brighton, where you've got a lot of people who are just making who are just making the kind of they've made something, or you see people's real rigs they put together themselves. I think that's really powerful and interesting as well.
Just seeing how people approach, and that has been, I think, for me, one of I'm going to go to a question that someone asked. We've got a bunch of questions that have come from people. Dennis McNulty asks, is Eurorack still interesting?
Yes, I think so. My favourite thing I saw recently was Nonlinear Circuits, who's one of my favourite designers in Australia, because everything he does is done, I think, fundamentally kind of quickly, and everything is analog. So he doesn't, as I do, get completely stuck programming some tedious thing for years on end. He just did a thing, LDR-Rama, and it's a panel, quite a big Euro panel, the top of the panel is a grid of like 40 something LDRs, which are light sensitive resistors. And the bottom is a bunch of sockets and, one knob on it. And the idea is you place your phone onto the bed of LDRs. Whatever is playing on your phone produces light. And then there's like 8, 10 outputs at the bottom that produce signals that are related to what's happening in the image there. And I think that's such a brilliant, interesting, clever idea, and completely analog, completely kind of chaotic and unpredictable. And it's exactly the sort of thing that you can imagine people coming up with loads of different things that you can do with that are different from what he's got the idea of. You put a phone on it. There will be lots of other things you can do with it. There'll be ways you can feed it back into itself. There'll be ways you can do all sorts of things you can do with it. And I think the thing that's nice about Eurorack is just because the barriers to entry are low, because the ecosystem is so simple. You just have to make a panel and that's it. You don't have to make a power supply. You don't even have to make the other 5 sides of the box. Does the box have 6 sides or 8 sides? Anyway,
could be open at the bottom.
6 sides. You can try things very cheaply and you can put them out into the world and you can see how people react to them. So I think that that hasn't changed, and I think people are still, the more people who have it, the more people will be able to experiment with it in that kind of way. But what do you think to that question?
Well, I get the question. I think the question comes from the fact that Eurorack is becoming more ubiquitous, and there are people who've at this point gone through of owning it or being interested in it for many years, and I don't think I saw a thread about it. Someone was kind of like, I'm getting disillusioned with Eurorack, just all this stuff, and there's so many things that come out. I'm just like, I'm just kind of, I've had it. I just want to go back to sort of a simpler time. And I recognize that there is an information overload with Eurorack because there are things coming out all the time. And my solution is don't look at any of it and don't go on forums. I
don't think I've seen most of what's come out over the last year.
Nor have I. Things come across my radar when they sort of percolate. It's almost like I'm actively trying to ignore it, and it just like, it sort of needled me for too much, like a name of a celebrity or a song or something that I just don't, that I'm just not interested in, but it just comes up enough. But I think in answer to, is it interesting? It comes from a frustration of being burned out. And I think what I would say to that is, yes, it is still interesting. And it's just a medium. It's like saying, it's like people who say they don't like ice cream. I'm like, that's just...
Or music.
Or music, yeah. It's just like, come on. Like, what you mean by that is I've not found a type of music. I mean, it could also be that you have some sort of particular, brain structure that means that music is annoying to you. But the point of what I would say is, and I think what I'm trying to do with videos that I'm making is, I've been making a series of videos where it shows like a small system designed to make a particular result, where it's like, this system was designed for a result. And if you think about modular like that, then it should never be boring, because there's thousands of modules to choose from and there's an infinite amount of results to achieve. And so Eurorack should be seen as the making of your perfect music machine. That is what it is at its purest point. And it can work any way that you like, and you become the designer. And the point is, if you think it's boring, I don't think you're thinking like a designer. You're just like, you're expecting it to be handed to you. Or do you know what I mean? I think it's, or that you're just not interested in that process. Like, I'm not up for designing something. I just want to buy something that someone else has used and focus more on making music, which is a very commendable goal if that's the case.
And as we always say in these, I think there is a big, what people are doing with Eurorack and with really any hardware music stuff now is they are doing something that is willfully anachronistic and something that is deliberately doing something to be more different and more interesting than the sort of straight path. The straight path is you've got Ableton on your laptop and you can do anything with it. And if you want to write a song, you can produce a great. If you want to do anything with it, you can do it. Or if you're more experimental, you can do it on pure data rather than Ableton, or whatever it is. That straight path is there, and anything involving any kind of hardware is deliberately deciding to diverge from that straight path. If you're finding that boring, then you shouldn't do that. It's not like it's a, and I don't think that is probably what Dennis is saying anyway. But I think if you've had it for a long time and you're bored of it, maybe you should do something else. We're back to James Murphy again. It's sell your guitars and buy turntables. Sell your turntables and buy guitars.
Yeah, exactly. I would just argue that you can make a music machine that can allow you to be more fluid than Ableton Live with enough modules.
Yeah.
You really could.
Yes.
But yeah, no, it's true. You could just sell it all. Get your little credit card slider thing and just a pure data patch. You can get that. It's out, isn't it? The credit card slider thing.
Yes, I think so. Yeah, the tape head one is definitely out.
What about the little thing you showed me last year with your 8 sliders on it?
Oh, that one I'm still programming it. I mean, literally.
Have you released anything this year? That's not. I'm not accusing. This
no,
isn't
I don't think so. Well, actually, so one
question.
of the other questions that has come up from a few people has been, what about the
big 4 knobs?
What about the big
quad
4
knobs? The quad knobulator,
which is there. And that has not come out yet because of COVID and China. So there's lots of kind of. I was talking to Steve about a month ago, and there is weird stuff in the electronic supply chain at the moment. So you see. Well, there are just things that are held up, things that are more difficult than you'd expect. I've seen in other other channels, people are like, "Oh, we can't get certain microcontrollers; they're all sold out everywhere." Last year there was a whole thing on capacitors you couldn't buy, but then this year so the specific story with that control module was we sent off to China to get the circuit boards made, probably maybe 4 months ago or so, and they just kept delaying, not coming back. And there's nothing at all weird or complicated in that module. It's a very, very straightforward thing. But it's whether they were working through backlogs from earlier in the year, whether there were delays in shipping, whatever it was. But apparently they are back now, and big knobs will be available in February. I've certainly not been going to Steve and saying, "Oh, have you got this ready? Is this ready to go out yet?" So the way it works is I literally kind of design things and then send them off and say, "Right, this is done now. I've built my prototype. I've maybe got a prototype made in, the circuit board might have been done by the company that we'd use to make the circuit board." And then it's over to him to do the difficult bit, and do the kits and do the supply chain and all of that side of it. I think the little drive, the kind of mini Moog drive thing will come out as well, which is just a really nice, simple, quick. It would have been good for workshops. It's a really nice, quick, easy thing to make.
I love that you put the overload light in it as well.
It's literally the story for that module was I was looking at Instagram and there was a sound gas video. I think it was actually of their Spring Reverb, which has got a similar thing on it. And that kind of reminded me of that circuit in the Mini Moog. And I started playing with it on the little phone app, because I don't actually have a Mini Moog kind of knocking about the place.
Well, you got the Behringer one.
And I was like, oh, this is, there's something really nice about this kind of overdrive and this kind of feedback loop and this cool light on it. And then did the circuit very, very quickly. The fiddly thing was obviously finding all the transistors that aren't the same as the ones they used in 1970 whatever. And then when I got the prototypes back, it sounded really nice and seemed to work well. So that was another one. This is very much kind of, I've made this thing, I don't know if anyone's going to want it. And it also is to do with, that one's to do with, I mean, I've always been interested in kind of feedback loops and feedback, and there's stuff in that as well about putting that into a feedback loop, and it's got kind of 2 ins and 2 outs at the bottom. So there's something about it there that makes it kind of interesting, I think. But
distortions, I think, are very analog, and that's, to me, coming back to Mr. Nonlinear, is, I was thinking about our takeaways from 2020. There are many, but I was playing with, I have a Juno 60, and I was playing with the Arturia JU6, I think it is their Juno. I was playing with that software, and I've not had the experience with the whole V collection thing where I've actually really known the instrument that was in it. But I really know what that sounds like. And so playing with the software, I was like, oh my goodness. Like, I hear how similar it sounds. And then you can say, oh, no, you don't do the same. And I'm like, well, then I had to go to the actual Juno to remind myself, because it was so easy for me to think, oh, that's not exactly like the Juno. But yet, when I took the time to get it right and to compare, because you do need different settings, and it is also different setting, dragging a mouse. By the way, you can right click with the mouse and you get very fine control, which is good. So because on the sliders of the Juno, it really almost comes down to like almost rolling your finger to get a fader in exactly the right spot. I was kind of laughing at one point because I was like, this is just silly. And you think, I came to the conclusion, I was like, but I was playing with that, and I also, Yuhi Heckman sent me Diva, and I had a real proper rinse of Diva, and just finally come to the conclusion now in 2020 that analog doesn't matter. That I'm a little late to the party, and I still like these objects, but what matters is interaction, is the way that you interact with something. Hence, Nicholas's Jupiter 8 controller, I think, is very valuable. But if you are purely talking about sound, I think we're there. I just think it's a non-argument at this point. With that said, though, there are still certain things, and there are still, in the world of distortion and feedback, and I don't have a tremendous understanding of DSP, it feels like distortions are where you'll find what analog is still best at.
I remember when I was playing with writing firmware for clouds, which I didn't do in any level of detail, and don't have any understanding of kind of proper DSP programming at all. But I remember it was really interesting doing that, and occasionally you would get something wrong, and it would start doing really, really interesting, really, really odd things. So in terms of feedback, it was definitely able to start producing things that were very, very, I don't know, felt very kind of non-linear and very kind of unexpected, or as warm or whatever, any of those kind of words as anything. I couldn't really kind of recreate them or make them terribly useful, but it was definitely something where I was kind of shocked by how quickly it became something that was indistinguishable from something that was all the sort of cliches about something analog, about it being analog and being non-linear and chaotic and all of those kind of things. So I don't think there's any real, magic to it. I think there's stuff in that we're very familiar with in modular about being able to just plug things into things where they're not supposed to be plugged into. I am surprised when you look at software synths. Why can't you just why can't you connect everything to everything else? And that sort of weirdness, I think, and that sort of feedback loop is physically much easier to do in a modular system or in a hardware system when you've got like a few guitar pedals plugged together or something, than it might be to do in lots of software or lots of, there are probably plenty of other things where you can't, you probably can't plug things into random places in a Juno 60 because those sort of patch points don't exist. It's not something you do. Yeah.
But you can also push a Juno 60 to extremes and sort of have it howls and does this, especially the filter. One of the things one of the differences was that I discovered how unstable the filter on my Juno 60 is. And I sent recordings to the people developing it, and they were like, because I was like, oh, yours isn't doing it right. And they're like, no, ours doesn't do what yours does. Your Juno 60 is weird. Like, it's not, and they have real, they had a Juno 6, which is what they were basing it primarily on. I don't know if there are subtle differences between it being a 60 and therefore needing a layer of digital control, but, he's like, yours is weird. Yours is doing weird things, and it's that classic thing. It is, they are all subtly different, which also speaks to the point that, like, it doesn't, when people say it doesn't sound like the real thing, it's like, they really are all different. And you are possibly splitting hairs.
Every component will have a 10% variance, and that will have been 20, 30, 40 years ago. So they may well be significantly more than that now. But then equally, digitally, you can obviously recreate that quite easily as well. I think somebody was talking about doing digital devices where they're all actually different. So you could quite easily have a digital device that reads the serial number of the CPU and uses that to say, right, these are going to be the allowances in this machine, and this machine will sound different from your machine. And that's a very simple, mathematically, that's a very simple thing to do. Anything with a random number generator in it has to have a number to start that random number generator off.
Or it could be at different times of the day, it could sound different as well.
Whenever you do stuff with a random number generator, it is interesting how, so if you've got two devices that have normal kind of random number generators in them, if you can turn them on at exactly the same moment, or actually often if you just turn them on, if it starts doing whatever it's doing immediately, it will be exactly the same. Because they both start at 0 and the random number generator keeps ticking on. Often what you'll do is if you're doing it, you might have a seed for that. So you might have a pin that isn't connected to anything. So it's got kind of white noise, it's got noise in it. And you'll say, okay, read that pin. Okay, that pin is at number 4027. Okay, start the random number generator at 4027. So it will be different every time you start it up. But I'm always really intrigued by that, because as well, that the other way of looking at that is to say, okay, rather than saying this is random, I'm saying there are 150,000 different versions of this, and you can choose which one you want. And if you set it to the same number, it will produce the same thing. And it was interesting playing with that. I got the Fates, which is like the Norns, this monomy thing. That's a lot of fun for that kind of thing. You can create something in there where it will create a sequence, and you say, right, that sequence has this seed, and every time you play it with that seed, it will produce the same sequence. But you can also choose another seed. So it's that you very immediately get this sense that this box has got whatever it is, 300,000 different sequences in it, and they are all reproducible and they're all repeatable. There's no actual randomness in it, but for you as a user, it can feel like it's producing something random.
On the subject of repeatable randomness, when is the Turing Machine 2 coming out? The DSP version?
It's definitely not something like this. So this was something we always get, because the Turing Machine's the most sort of popular thing still that I've made and that Thonk sell. And it is quite a complicated circuit. There's a reasonable amount to it. So you do get people having trouble with it. People will make them and it won't work. And the thing that's most sort of difficult in it is the noise generator. So it has a noise generator in it, and that's the thing that causes the randomness to be random. And the noise generator is literally, it has a transistor that is connected up wrong, and because it's connected up wrong, it produces noise. And that's how noise generators are made. But it does mean it's probably affected by temperature. It means it's affected by the specific transistor you happen to have. And that's why there's a little trimmer in it, and you set the trimmer to get the right level of randomness you want. But people, some people have trouble with that. There's a trimmer behind the main pot.
What do you mean? You mean
behind the pot? Behind the pot, there is I don't know if you might have to unscrew it. Behind the pot, there's a little window and there's a little trimmer in it. Did you not build your own Turing machine?
I have these things built for me. No, I haven't built this Turing machine, but I did build my other Turing machine, which is my sort of first one.
I mean, I might have imagined it. Just look.
No, I see it.
So there's a little trimmer there, and that just sets the gain.
Shit, indeed, the bed. Inside the right thing, that leads into a trimmer inside.
That's it. Yeah. No, it's in the spring reverb. It's behind the pot.
I built a really old one, which did not. It was just all Perspex.
Yeah,
I think I had to get buy the Perspex separate. It was before the good old days of thumb.
Yes, yeah, that was definitely that would have been Mark 1. But so I was thinking about this
warmer circuits,
and I started. I was doing something with an Arduino, and I was like, oh, what would it be like to make a digital version of this? And I discovered that you could replace about 20 plus components in the Turing machine with one line of Arduino code, literally one line. But then you obviously start thinking this through and thinking, well, do I want to do that? How many do you replace? And then obviously it becomes something different, it becomes something that's a computer. And I definitely would do that if I had an idea for something that it could do then that would be significantly different. And there are obvious things that a Turing can't do. So you can't do reset. You can't store anything, save any patches or anything like that. So you could conceivably do something like that. And obviously there are, like the VCV rack Turing machine has reset in it. I remember talking to the people who coded it, and I was like, yeah, of course, if you're not actually doing it with logic chips, then that would be a reasonably sensible thing to have in there. But I don't think I'm going to spend much time.
I can think of lots of good things. It could have scale quantization. It could have multiple outputs. So it could have multiple clock inputs. So you could have like 3 clock ins and 3 outs, and you could clock it. And it could be the same sequence being clocked, a bit like that Bach thing, fugue machine.
Yes.
It's like the same thing with different playheads. And
it could definitely be all those things.
It could be it could be a different. It could coexist. It could be a different model.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely something. There's still lots of interesting things about sequencing. It's just I so far haven't got to the point of having something that is what I want, and that the interface is what I want. And it's that thing of I think I do always want things to feel I was going to say analog, but it's not feeling analog. It's feeling sort of tangible. I was talking to somebody the other day about radio music, and they were interested in the idea of recreating things in Eurorack. So the idea of saying you're taking something and reproducing it in that Eurorack format. And so we were saying radio music is reproducing a radio in Eurorack format. But it does that in a very, very sort of partial way, in that it's got that thing where if you have long files, they carry on playing in the background. But that's really the only sort of skeuomorphic thing about it. And you could obviously have a thing which then, as you switch between files, it makes a sort of squelchy radio noise. Or you could have a thing where you could literally be detuned, so it would be kind of between samples, in a very kind of, which would be a really interesting thing to do, but is quite it's something very different. It does then become skeuomorphic, and it sort of feels like it's giving one answer rather than giving people the ability to find answers themselves, I think. But I don't know. I feel very pretentious by my concern. You know, just thinking about it, I was like, I am just being really pretentious about this. You know, maybe because I just couldn't be bothered to code some radio noise in between.
No, but you would need to be excited about it to have the impetus to do it. You're not going to do something that you're like, well, it could, but it just, am I even into that as a notion? I get that you have to be excited about something because it's clearly not a job. Do you know what I mean? This is not a job for you in the sense, like it's not something that you do because it pays the bills. It's something that you do as a passion project that has a fringe benefit of, helping to pay for things and just generally wash its face. So, but I think that's fair. I don't think you have to do what you're interested in. It's just a shame that it's been very, difficult to do things this year. Because
sorry, I'm just going to interrupt you because my disk has filled up.
Oh dear.
There we go.
Give ourselves a round of applause. And we're back in the room. Technology is amazing. I forgot what we were just talking about just then a second ago in a kind of digital amnesia because we had to stop for 20 minutes.
Yes, I don't know what we were talking about just then.
Oh, well, are you about to say what we were talking about?
No, I was saying what we were talking about literally a second ago, which was work and being on Zoom all day long. And you can't work in a shared office. You can't concentrate.
I feel that, yes, shared office working is not that effective. Depending on the type of work you do, I think you need privacy to think about things and have a thought process. And it's very hard to do that when there are conversations like they're happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I would say that, like, if COVID is good for at least just one thing, it's the fact that as a working world, we're embracing remote work, which is a way of saying we're embracing the fact that, when people get promoted, that whole sort of Mad Men thing of, when you do really well, you get your own private office. That's considered like a level up. Like, I wonder if there's a reason why it's considered a level up to have your own private office.
There's certainly some types of work where it is nice to have everyone in one place, though. Certainly the kind of creative collaboration stuff is a lot more difficult. It's not entirely more difficult. It's certainly not impossible, but it's definitely more difficult to do it.
Can't we just Slack
in this weird way?
Slack and Crack and just all of these like services? Do they not replicate that?
Well, I think it's more it would be nice to all go in and have a workshop every, a couple of times, maybe once a week, but not to be. I think the thing that will really go is the idea of going and sitting in an office to look at a computer, which has been what people have been doing for the last 10 years and is just madness. When you go and you see, I'll go into these offices and you'll see, like in a bank or something, just rows and rows of people all looking at the internet. And they've all got sat on a train for an hour to go in and look at the internet there, and that doesn't seem like a good use of anyone's time.
It took doing it to prove to the people in charge that it wouldn't affect business horrifically. That it wouldn't be like our business will just plummet off a cliff if everyone's just going to be sat in their underpants, sleeping until midday and then logging on. It's like, well, you have to. I think the good response to that is that if you're afraid of that, then are you actually managing people effectively? If you aren't aware of what people are doing or what is going on or where projects are at, then it is an indicator that you are not managing.
Yeah, you've got a different set of problems.
So speaking of problems, I'm looking at, I've got the sort of questions from people. We've started talking about some of these questions. I like Minimal Micro asks, best DJ set you've witnessed, best live set you've witnessed.
Wow, that's so. I obviously saw lots and lots of DJ sets in my previous existence when I used to be the editor of Mixmag.
Yes.
So we used to go to the Miami Winter Music Conference every year. So this was a kind of work trip where you go out to Miami and there's all the DJs all sitting around hotel swimming pools. So I remember like Danny Tenaglia's parties at that were always amazing for that sort of.
Talk me through a Danny Tenaglia party. What was his?
It would just be in some big open air kind of party with, just playing, really cool music for about 8 hours or something.
Are you a dancer? Would you be like cutting a rug, or are you?
No, I'd be pottering about and talking to people at the bar.
You're sort of more of it's a social event.
Yeah. But what about you? What's your answer to that question?
What, best DJ set, or what's my favourite Danny Tenaglia party?
No, what would a good DJ set be?
I don't listen to that many. I really enjoy, like, when I'm like working, day job working, I will put on like Boiler Rooms and have sets on in the background and stuff. And there's obviously is amazing. I mean, Boiler Room is just a very entertaining resource, but for a variety of reasons, mainly to watch extremely mashed people be really annoying and cringy around DJs. But there are some exceptional sets on there. I'm trying to think what my sort of favourites, but I think particularly it's like in terms of good DJ sets, there is the Deckmantle 100th anniversary podcast, which is Helena Hauff. Right. I realised it was Helena Hauff, and I've been saying I always thought it was Helena Hauff. So I'm sorry, Helena. It's Helena Hauff, and it's like just an absolutely stormingly banging electro set that sort of just. Like, it's just one of those sets where, like, each one is like, ooh. And it's like, right, okay, like, this is even better. It's like a masterclass in, like, tough electro and, like, modern and old. And it's really good. So I would thoroughly recommend that. And that's quite old, I think. And I particularly enjoyed, there's Paul Barker of Din Sync fame has done a few, like, Facebook streams, and there's... Facebook DJ sets. Paul just putting on some records. And there have been some discoveries from listening to Paul's sets that really, because that for me is like, it almost replaces radio. Like we have Six Music in the UK, and that is a good radio station. I would say it is the only, like on national DAB, it's the only good radio station. Of course, some very good internet radio stations like, NTS and so forth. But, also, another brilliant one, I was listening to Finlay Shakespeare. Finlay Shakespeare.
I need to listen to that one, yeah.
It's brilliant.
On Ballamy.
And it was on Ballamy, which I've never heard of. Ballamy is an internet radio station, one of the great ones, I'm sure.
In Peckham.
And he did a 2-hour set, and it is just brilliant. I mean, I really like Finlay's taste, because Finlay's very into electro, but he's also into sort of, new romantic kind of, there's like, well, not new romantic, but like he likes kind of synth, 80s synth pop with the vocals, the words, as much as electro and other things. And there's a bit where he was playing like a Doppler effect, doing like an amazing Doppler effect tune that I haven't heard over Prince Charles and Lady Diana's marriage ceremony, which he mixed in. I thought it was amazing. I was like, this is incredible. What is this? I was texting him. I was like, what is this? And it's just for a way of discovering new music. Like, it reminded me to buy the Human League's Dare album. And there was one that Finlay was like, you got the wrong one. You need to buy Love and Dancing, which is Martin Rushent doing a kind of like dance remix from the stems of the Human League's Dare album, which is really interesting. So I've bought that. I bought CDs because I gave up Spotify in 2020. That is something I did. Mainly, I mean, partly from talking to you, where you're pointing out the fact that there is this sort of music on Spotify that are in mega playlists that get, these sort of random generative piano pieces that have got millions of hits and are attributable to absolutely nobody, and yet they somehow find their way into, Spotify's biggest rotation playlist, combined with just like all the shite that Daniel Ek has said. And it's just this sense that it just is not working. If you're a massive musician, you get millions of plays, it definitely pays you some money, and it will be a strong contributing factor to your wealth and it keeping you afloat. But if you're anything but, it's a hindrance at this point.
Yeah. And is it
go on.
Because the record labels are taking that money? Because that's what I've never quite understood, because there does seem to be money being generated. It's not like actually Spotify is generating vast profits. There's got lots of revenue, but it's the record labels all have enormous shares in Spotify.
From what I understand, and I'm not that well versed in it, but that obviously record labels take a reasonably meaty percentage of any income that you make. You as the artist do not get 100% of your listening, revenue, and so the label takes their cut. But I think the other things it comes down to are the fact that it's the model by which Spotify operates is that it does not distribute the money based on the listening that you, Tom Whitwell, do on Spotify. So if you do nothing but listen to extremely strange music, concrete music from, one Polish composer for the whole year, if you only listen to that composer's music, that composer does not get your $9.99 a month. What happens is your $9.99 gets divided across all of the music that is listened to on Spotify. And that does not include your habits. It's just everyone's listening. And so, all of the mega pop artists, Ed Sheeran and so on, who make up a huge amount of the listenership will get the lion's share of your $9.99 because that's how it works. And that tiny, tiny fraction of people who listen to this Polish composer, then that composer gets whatever that fraction is from everyone's $9.99. And so it doesn't distribute the money based on what you actually listen to. All it does, it just spreads everything across it, if that makes sense.
It feels a bit like it's replaced radio, but the revenue from radio was always relatively marginal, and nothing's replaced the record sales. And then obviously this year nothing's replaced live music. So it's been.
But the point is, they would say it's semi-comparable to radio in terms of the amount of people that hear you versus what you get. But of course, as you've just said, is the key difference is that Spotify is robbing you a sale of an album potentially, which makes you a vastly larger amount of money. If someone actually buys your CD or your MP3, far more money comes into your pocket than would with a Spotify player. It takes one Bandcamp sale to generate what would be, many thousands of plays. And so this is why if you're a smaller artist and you just don't have that big an audience, then it doesn't make sense. And I think to make a parallel, I can say for myself, making YouTube videos, I have ads on my videos and I get a certain amount of money based on the ads. But I also have a Patreon, and wonderful, amazing people contribute to my Patreon to say as a tip jar, I like what you do. Thank you for making things. Here's, £4 a month. And that Patreon money is significantly higher than the income that I would get from ad revenue, because I make relatively niche videos and get relatively few views. Yeah. And yet I can almost make a disproportionate amount of money when we're talking about ad revenue, so that it makes sense for me to continue making videos, because it's not really enough to live on the amount that I'm, and support a family, but it is enough, a bit like music thing. It's enough for me to say, I should keep doing this, and I want to keep this going and try and grow it. But if I didn't have Patreon and I was just relying on ad revenue, then I just wouldn't be making enough money. And I'd have to start making videos that have featured cats and do controversial things in order to get, viewers at all costs.
You could always be sponsored by some kind of successful German synthesizer company, maybe.
Well, yeah, exactly.
They could sponsor you completely, so you only reviewed their material.
Well, but they don't like, advertising in any way or sponsorship of any form. Hence asking on Facebook, which sort of news outlets do you trust? Which do you not trust? No, we don't talk about them. So DJ sets, what about music?
Live music.
Well, live set. What's your sort of favourite live set that you may have seen?
So in terms of real live sets, there are lots. I think I talked about in the past going to see Prince just before he died, and that was a really amazing thing to see when he was on his kind of last tour, playing at the Roundhouse, and that was incredible. I was watching, because I've very much missed, being able to go to concerts. It's one of the things that I think really, really, have missed out on this year. and whether it's even just going to Cafe Otto and seeing somebody playing teacups or something, which is always a fun thing to do. But I was saying that I was watching on YouTube because one of my favorite things ever on YouTube is that there's a Talking Heads concert from 1980 in Rome that is just this incredible concert with this incredible lineup that's sort of a few years before they did Stop Making Sense, which is much more of a kind of shiny, polished concert film. And then this year, David Byrne did this incredibly shiny, basically a Broadway show where he plays old Talking Heads songs in a kind of Broadway musical kind of way, which was quite, I wasn't entirely convinced by, but that did sort of send me back to YouTube to start looking at kind of old concerts and stuff. And the two things that sort of came up when I was looking at that, one was there is an amazing New Year's Eve concert by Ian Dury. Ian Dury and the Blockheads playing in, I think it is 1980 again. And just this absolute, I don't know if you've seen there's an incredibly Ian Dury film, like a feature film with Andy Serkis about his life. Yeah. And this concert is just extraordinary because, apart from anything else, he's got a trumpet player who is Don Cherry, who is Nana Cherry's dad and this incredible experimental jazz trumpet player. He's got Wilco Johnson playing guitar with him. And it's just this kind of crazy, incredibly kind of English, incredibly London, incredibly kind of weird, eccentric thing. This kind of concert that was broadcast on like BBC Two in 1980 or something. So it has the whole show. And then once you watch that, then YouTube recommends the Kate Bush in 1979 when she did, a tour. She did two tours in her career. One was in 1979, the other one was whenever it was a few years ago. And that's just an incredibly odd, really, really extraordinary thing to see. It's the first time that anyone had ever performed with like a head-mounted radio mic. So her sound engineer made this thing from a coat hanger. It's literally a handmade thing. And it's this just really, really kind of extraordinary, very kind of theatrical, very, very weird show that she did at wherever it was, the Hammersmith Odeon or somewhere.
Is that because she wants to like move and express herself?
Yeah, she's completely dancing all the way through in, wearing a variety of kind of leotards. And it's just a really extraordinary thing. The whole thing. So yeah, those were two kind of concerts that I watched recently because I haven't been allowed out to see any.
Because you were able to go into a time machine.
Exactly.
Actually, what about that reminds me. Well, in a similar vein, that has just reminded me that I did when Florian Schneider passed away. Yeah. I started digging back into Kraftwerk gigs.
Oh wow!
There's some really good. There's loads of recordings of Kraftwerk gigs from various years, but the ones that I'm particularly interested in are the Computer World tour, which I assume would be like 81. I can't remember the exact year, but they came to the UK, and it's like, there's lots to it. I mean, if you look online, you can find there's a scan from like I can't remember the name of the magazine, but basically a 70s like electronic music and sort of DIY magazine from the UK, I think, which has a Kraftwerk. It has a whole like double page spread with a picture of their stage setup with like arrows pointing to what everything is and big interview with them explaining how it works. But there are, you can hear the whole concerts and it is just, Computer World is like the album for them. And they just play I think they just play Computer World the whole way through with some variants. It is just an extraordinary spectacle, and like the stage setup I think is like one of the best expressions of like electronic music on stage, because they had the Kling Klang studio, which is they had everything fitted into these racks, and there's very few pictures of Kling Klang, but you can find, there is a picture where you can see these custom speakers or speakers hanging on like trestles, and then the tubes, and then you can see everything in the angled racks. And it was because that, I understand, is they did have, like, they had everything fitted in Kling Klang. And the whole idea was that Kling Klang could be put onto touring buses and could be taken and wheeled out to, Huddersfield Town Hall or wherever, it was they were playing. They didn't play in Huddersfield, but there was some amazing electronic music played in Huddersfield.
Yeah.
But the, wherever it was. And they've got like neon tubes, and they had, I don't think they had projections. They might have had projections at that time. But of course they were doing, all of their keyboards were in little like cases, so you couldn't really see what they were. But then there's video where you can see it from the other side, and you can see that he's got like a Poly Moog, and it's a Prophet 5, and it's the Mini Moog. And there's lots to it. I was deconstructing like the Eventide they were using, which was the 1745M. But particularly because when it opens, it's like there's like a drum beat, and there's like it's like a runaway Eventide pitch shifting sound where it's like boing, it goes up because it's pitch shifting up and up and up. And just, I got teary thinking about how mind blowing it would be to be, impressionable in 1981, and then, you're in this thing and there's all this mystical equipment and this just sound like, and it just opens with like pure electro kick. It's like the birth of electro music, basically, or a form of it. And then, you've got the runaway sound, so it's like a strange alien thing, and it comes out. It's just like, so it's musically fantastic, but it's also just that sort of sense of being there to witness something being born. And there is a really good, if you watch the Jeremy Deller documentary, that Everything in Its Right Place, he talks about a picture of Ralph Hutter like leaning out the pocket calculator in New York, and there's like a African American person leaning out to play the pocket calculator. Yeah, and there's and it's mixed. There's black people and white people in the audience. Everyone's smiling, and everyone's like like he's and it's. He says that whenever I feel depressed, I look at that picture and I think about how you've got this amazing cultural sort of crash where, these white guys do something, but then black people take it and turn it into electro. Then you actually get electro, and then house and techno. And so and that is a very important point, obviously with Black Lives Matter move, but it's reminding people that, these music styles, which have become very whitewashed, and there's, that whole DJ Mag top 100 DJs, that whole I mean, I don't know if Mixmag had DJ, polls and stuff, but it's, all these pioneers, yes, it starts with Kraftwerk, but really the people who, that was just a germ, and it took black musicians to turn it into the styles that we love. And and all of this equipment, there is all these industries that are feeding off dance music, that was the history of it. Yeah, agreed.
I don't have anything to add to that. I agree.
Okay, good. You said you bought a Soma Ether.
Oh, yes.
Quite.
Yeah.
I really want one of those.
So it's like a little thing. It's like smaller than your phone, and it looks and feels just like a radio, and it is a radio. You put a couple of AAA batteries in it, and in the description it says, "We don't know how long the batteries last. We've got the same set in our prototype from 6 years ago, and they haven't gone flat yet. So we assume it will last quite a while." It's got two controls. One's just a volume, one on-off switch, and then it's got this sort of tuning control that I don't know exactly what it's doing. And then it's got two little metal knobs that come at the top, like little antenna. It's quite like a detuned radio. But I got it like a week or two ago, and you feel very, very, very pretentious doing this. But I was just put some little earbuds, had it in my pocket, and just go out and walk to the shops or whatever, whatever you're doing when you're allowed out in lockdown. And you just get these kind of waves of weird, of noise, of different types of noise. So I was listening, doing it in the evening. You can just about, you hear cars go past. You get a little kind of buzz when cars go past. I discovered some parked cars produced a slow rhythmic kind of clicking. So you walk up to it and it starts going like a clock ticking or something. When some types of bus go past, you get this massive noise kind of coming out of, and it's not completely clear how directional it is. It's not like you point it and it picks up different things. You will suddenly hear there's like a really, really loud kind of buzzing noise or something. And you try and work out where it's coming from, where it is. And I think like walking past those, you get those sort of phone boxes at the end of the road. They seem to produce kind of weird noise. You then feel extremely peculiar because you start standing there and if you just turn around, the sound changes. So you feel like a complete freak walking around. I just had it like in my jacket. I was too self-conscious to literally walk around waving it. There's a great video of Heinbach demonstrates it. And I think in that video, a blimp, like an airship, goes past. Exactly. And I think he can kind of pick up something coming from that. But it is you really do just feel like there is this completely different, it's like a different sense. But it's very hard to kind of make sense of what it's actually doing. You also get actual radio coming into it. So mine kept picking up Radio 4. And sometimes very clearly, and, it was like listening to the radio. Other times it kind of washes in and washes out. So I've only heard it doing Radio 4. You can then, obviously, if you touch the metal sort of prongs that come out, you then become part of the circuit, or you can touch them to other things. So you touch to like a railing, and the whole railing is kind of your antenna.
Oh, my God.
It says they spent a long time kind of tweaking it, and it's quite different from the most straightforward kind of circuit. Because when I did a module that had a guitar pickup in it, and that does the same sort of thing, but in the crudest way, that's just literally amplifying that circuit. And I think the kind of the Electro Slush, which is the other one you can get, which is similar to that, it's basically amplifying a coil. I get the feeling this is doing something slightly different, because it's definitely got some element of tuning in it, I think. But yeah, I would definitely recommend.
When you like open it up and inside you see like the wires go into a piece of bone or something awful. Like some kind of, it's some cursed device that uses Wicca and magic in order to. I do love the idea that there's just a hidden sound, like there's that, or similar, like there's that app RJDJ, which was in the early days of the iPhone, and I hope still exists in some form. That was an app that you would walk around and you would use your iPhone headphones and it would use the mic and it would like remix the sound around you. So it would add delay and reverb and echo and like pitch shift it. And I absolutely love that, because you'd walk past something and you'd hear a version of it kind of remixed and reinterpreted. But the idea that there's hidden sounds in things is just wonderful.
It was it's absolutely that. And you I remember yesterday I was doing it and walked past the local train station, and suddenly this like incredibly loud kind of buzzing kind of fades in, and just really, really you had to turn the whole thing down. I don't know if it's coming from the tracks, it's coming from a device, it's coming from the train, because you really can't quite tell where things are coming from.
Is there music in things? Does something have a musical tone to them? Do you know what I mean? Like, are they pitched?
They're definitely pitched, and there are definitely some things that have, kind of interesting sort of shattering kind of, those sort of data sounds almost. There's a lot of buzzes. But the other thing is, as the kind of tuning control does make an enormous difference. So like if you have it in one position, as you're walking around, you hear, small kind of white noisy noises everywhere. You have another position, you might get like big, sort of much bassier noises. I'm still feeling slightly self-conscious wandering around. You do find yourself sort of slightly rubbing yourself on lampposts to see what it's like.
I mean, whatever you do when you go outside, I guess you've got to take what you can get. It's good that you were going outside at all, I think, Tom.
It will be very interesting to see how different it is if you're somewhere very remote. The other thing I found is you turn your phone off because your phone obviously interferes with it.
I did hear. Is this true that if you put it up to a tree, you can hear the radio? Like radio.
I could well imagine that because it becomes an antenna. Yeah,
and it's sort of the odd principles by which it works. Like I might have to just get one because it just seems so fascinating, that idea of the hidden sounds in things.
Yeah.
I suppose what it reminds me as well is beyond RGDJ properly is detuned shortwave radios and exploring the sort of the sonic fire and brimstone, which is the only way I can describe it, where it's like if you listen to, there's a sense of staring into the abyss when you listen to shortwave radios, because they can make sort of very hellscape-like tones where you get actual number stations and things that are tinged with sinister, spy overtones and sort of clandestine communications, and then things that sound like almost Morse code. You're just like, is it Morse code? It could be. I've heard all manner of things, including I've also, through shortwave, I've heard the International Space Station.
Oh, wow.
Which was like, I don't know if I talked about this, but like the International Space Station was set up with a shortwave like station on it, and it was rebroadcasting what it received at a certain frequency while it passed over. And I realized that the International Space Station would be coming over the house here in the middle of Yorkshire at like 6:32 in the morning. And so at 6:32 in the morning, I got up early, I went outside, I had everything set up, I had a mini disc recorder, and I had my shortwave radio, and I literally went and stood in the middle of the lawn with my headphones on. And sure enough, at 6:32, it started to fade into my headphones, and I was hearing all of these broadcasts, which were all like, Spanish and like different language, multiple language broadcasts, like a sort of polyglot of sound. And it was, what I was hearing was from the International Space Station above me, but it was everything coming up and being rebroadcast back down by it. So I have a recording of that still somewhere. And
that's amazing.
It's just like those kinds of, that sense of, I don't know, communing across the ether is very interesting. It's just sort of, it tickles the same kind of bones as I do from like hearing ghost stories.
Yeah. The great thing about this is the movement as well. Like I remember, the other thing is you walk into like a supermarket and the whole thing just kind of lights up because there's so much electrics and lights and fridges and stuff. So there's something about that movement. It is like a different way of understanding the city or hearing the city.
And is it affecting me? It's that whole 5G thing. Does it hurt my body to? I mean, that's what I talked to a surgeon this year, and I loved how he talked about. He was like, I was thinking about the fact that not to do with like audio damage, but the sheer vibrations on my body that I experience from going to these going to like Dutch clubs where it's like arms warfare for sound systems. And, I love that. I was like, it's a fair point. Vibrating your body is like an industrial, sounds like the kind of thing that you would you'd sue, your employer for because, he can't sue his employer. He's self-employed. So I don't know if there's other questions. Have you learned any lessons? You got anything that you can take away from this year and bring into the next?
I don't know. I suppose it's the there's something about that feeling of feeling like you're not delivering something, which I've certainly felt this year. I felt like I haven't finished things. I haven't got, but then the real point of this is you do then focus on actually what's important. I'm healthy. I still have a job. I am fine. My family are all well. It is that just kind of absolutely reminding everyone of what's important, and I think, in my, both sides of my kind of work, in sort of my day job, it's been very good to be working for a company that's good and looks after the people who work for it and is trustworthy. And then seeing how Thonk responded to it, immediately completely restructuring the entire kind of operations of the company in order to make sure the people who work for it are safe and secure and well. That focus on what's actually important, I think, is probably the most positive thing to take away from what was otherwise quite a problematic year, I think. What about you?
I agree with that, certainly. I hope it's letting people talk more about their mental health. And there's certainly, I see online, there's a lot more people going, it's okay to not feel pretty good about what's going on. And don't feel that you're supposed to put on this like mega happy face if you're not feeling it, which is an obvious thing to do. But by very nature of the fact that everyone's experiencing something quite negative, of being, holed up and not able to see their friends and family, and like, not able to have a Christmas and things like that. It is reminding people that it is okay and that you should talk about those things if you can. And absolutely, yeah, your family. I had a kid in 2019, and I've watched him grow into a little boy, and he's now just in the last few days, as of kind of 15th of January, he's really starting to walk like he was toddling, but now he's like, this is almost my default mode now.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it does have an incredible way of focusing your mind on what is important. That is absolutely true. It's that thing that people say, oh, you can't be creative unless you're miserable. I find the opposite is true. I think you can't be creative if all your other needs are met. Like, how can I possibly have time to think about, finishing an album if I'm struggling to eat, and it's sort of, or I've got to work, and I'm worried about the virus and I could be passing it on to the people I live with, but I've got no choice because I've got to go to work. And how can you be creative unless you're feeling comfortable? I think if you've achieved anything, just be proud. But just, I don't know. It's like I talked to BT on this podcast, and he had some amazing things to say. And I liked how he said that, he's like, if you don't feel creative, like just tidy up your studio, organize your cables. I just got a label maker at Christmas. My power bin, I spent a day and I sorted out my power plug bin, and I've labeled every power plug. And so, so even so I can see minus 12 volt, 3 amp center positive. And so the act of doing that is almost like paying forward something something that will help you when you feel creative, which I thought was such an insightful thing to say. He embraces this thing of having concentrated setups. Not everything is patched into everything. The modular is an ideas discovery playground, and he has a dedicated computer for just capturing the audio that he works on that does nothing but just act as a tape machine, so he can hit spacebar and just have a little bit of a modular freak out, and then just takes that to his other computer to edit. And it's, the setting up of the modular area, he has all his clocks are pre-wired, everything's ready, so he doesn't lose anything when he wants to go to it. And so I suppose it's like thinking, if I don't feel like making something, or if I just kind of feel like, fuck it all, I just can't be arsed with this anymore, then do those housekeeping things, because if you can make your studio usable and accessible, that will probably make you feel good that you've done it. And when you do feel creative, you can just go up to this stuff and you use it. Because if you're anything like me, it's like if it ain't plugged in, I'm probably not going to use it. I'm a path of least resistance. So
yeah, I'm definitely feeling that kind of just being overwhelmed by loads of not quite done projects or not quite finished ideas. Like, if you're looking at this, you can see there's literally a pile of takeaway boxes up there, each of which is a project, and inside it'll have a circuit board and a few components and a few ideas. And I'm just thinking, I need a much better way of organizing and storing those projects, so I can make sense of them, because it's literally a stack of empty takeaway boxes and an ice cream box and stuff. And there's something about that, being able to then return to something, so you can then find it and you can make sense of it. So you don't essentially have to reinvent the whole thing from scratch when you go back to it. So you can carry on working on a bunch of different things simultaneously. Because I absolutely will do that, where you have an idea, you get very excited about an idea for a weekend, and then you might not think about it for 6 months. But then 2 years later, you might go back and finish it, and actually that's when the thing is done and it comes out. But you sort of feel that risk of losing those projects or losing those ideas, just physically, because you kind of lose the bits, or you lose how they worked, or you lose the sense of what you're kind of trying to do with it.
You need a sort of notebook, or like a.
You could use a notebook, yeah.
Journal or something, yeah. I don't know, but maybe you do need a new system for working, or you need some kind of like a whiteboard or something. There must be a solution. You're gonna have to design it. Or don't we need to get James Carruthers to come to Tom Whitwell Incorporated and do a study on what you're trying to do.
There's that fantastic story about what's his name, Stanley Kubrick, who was obsessed by his boxes that he stored his projects in.
Yes. Yeah.
And he had these boxes made and designed to a perfect size to store, I guess, scripts and whatever material was, and just had his archive was just shelves and shelves and shelves of these perfectly matched boxes. So perhaps that's my project for 2021 is suitable boxes. And when we do this next year, it'll just be a perfect grid of boxes with neatly described projects on the sides. And that will be my effort for the year.
Yeah. I'll have finished any music at all.
It's been brilliant watching Look Mum No Computer. His Patreon thing seems to just be amazing, how it's just driving him to do these kind of crazier and crazier projects. Every time I see it, he bought like an Edison cylinder record, player. It's just, that's an amazing
like any crackpot thing can be indulged. It is brilliant. Yeah. But that's also the benefit of it being a full-time job too. Is like if it
would be a very different thing, and I don't know whether it would be. I'm not at all sure it would be better or more enjoyable for me, and I don't think I would necessarily have the sort of freedom to just be. I'm only going to do things that I find interesting. Although I must say, I'm still trying to write the firmware for that slider thing, that fader box, and it's just tedious now. I'm nearly there.
Are you still getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning?
No, I did kind of a good year of that. That was partly because my daughter was doing it as well. And then she's gone to a different school. She doesn't do that anymore. I haven't been as deliberate certainly last year I wasn't nearly as good at doing that. And would like to get back to doing that, I think, but haven't quite got the focus yet. Have you been able to do that? I suppose your days will all be weird because you've got a small child, though.
There's a little wee guy. I'm really bad. I really am finding it hard to get up. And my wife is incredible. She's much, much, much more responsible than I am, and a much, arguably, in many respects, a better parent. Getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning is kind of the only viable way I can see in order to do additional creative projects whilst also having a full-time job. If you try and do it in the evenings, as you said last year, you're like, it's very hard, and doing it, you get your evenings back to decompress and do something you want to do. Because the alternative is that if you don't get up at 6, you don't want to do your creative project, you just want to do something else, then you feel guilty. And in a sense, you never really enjoy any of your free time because it's always gnawing at you that you've got homework to do. Whereas if you start the day and you do get up and you do the work, then you begin the day with a sense of achievement and you feel like, today I moved my project on a little bit and I feel good, and you start the day running. It really is amazing, but it does require getting up. I think I said last year that I've got this eye mask that has lights built in and an LED.
Oh, yeah.
You should definitely make a version of that because the programming on it is really whack. If you want a side project, is do a new version
I don't
of
want
those.
that.
And then a CV controlled version. So
just remotely controlled, so your Patreon supporters can wake you up when they think it's appropriate for you to get up. Yeah.
That's amazing. Some sort of Black Mirror episode.
If you're a pro subscriber, you can just wake you up and tell you to get.
You can see me sleep.
Done. Yeah.
Why not? So thanks very much. I think that's cool. We should stop talking. Let's stop talking. Oh, yeah. Thanks, Tom. Thank you very much for your time. That was Tom Whitwell, ladies and gentlemen, for the fourth time. Always a lovely time talking to Tom. Always interesting things that come out, as I say. Tons to unpack there. And I think probably the sort of main thing that I left that conversation with Tom just like absolutely raring to get a Soma Ether. So guess what I've got in my hand? And guess where I got it from? Yes, friends, it's signalsounds.com. They supplied the Soma Ether in short shrift because they have them in stock. It's true what the guy in the ad says. It is quick and easy. And here it is. I might actually play it. I've got it set up so we can actually have a little demo. Because, yeah, what Tom says is true. It's bonkers. It's if you put it near cars, like I put it near the car, like we've got a car with remote central locking. If you put it near the door handles themselves beep. There's like a little, when you get it right close to the handles, there's obviously some kind of like sensor there. And there's just sounds to be discovered in all manner of things. One particular standout highlight was variable dimmer switches. Like if you actually put them right up to the dimmer switch of your, dimmer for your big light, and you change the dimmer, then it sounds like pulse width modulation. It literally sounds like a pulse width modulated square wave, which probably electrically is what's actually happening in some form. But yes, I don't understand electrics. But yeah, I've got it here. It's like a black box. It's plastic. It's just a very light, thin little, like smaller than a cigarette packet, with two little prongs on the end. And indeed, if you turn it up, you hear fire and brimstone. So what I'll do is fade it up. Can you hear that? Just sounds like a tone. Well, that is my monitor. If I turn my monitor off, it goes dead. You get this kind of crunch, but I'll turn the monitor back on. Turn the monitor off. And so, yeah, if you like, just put it near things in your studio, there are sounds. These little pulsy things. I've got a little like LCD screen. That is a LED light. If I turn it on, ooh. That is turning the light on and off. So yeah, I mean, who needs all this bloody synthesizer crap when you've just got a little device that can hear the sounds in things? And of course, it's quite noisy in here. It's an interesting, it's not a great environment for getting different sounds, but there are some fascinating sounds to be had in the world. And it's just that it's that sense of getting a look at an invisible world. I think that's really interesting. As I said in the thing, it makes me think about like ghosts. You know what I mean? Like it's that idea of, the sort of hidden sort of spirits in things. It's very creepy. And as a sort of final thing to play you, because obviously that wasn't much of a thing. I mentioned during the podcast this whole like recording of the International Space Station that I made, and I sort of described it to Tom. Well, I've actually got that recording. I found it because it is still on my hard drive, and that recording, interestingly, it was from 2006. It was 5:39 in the morning on the 7th of February 2006, so 15 years ago, that I went outside and stood with my mini disc recorder. I'm going to chop it up a little bit and shorten it just because it was quite, you don't need to hear the whole thing. But I thought you might be interested to hear it. It's noisy and it makes me think of the Soma Ether. So, thank you very much, Tom, for your time. I want to thank signalsounds.com and, of course, Skillshare for sponsoring. Check out that link in the description if you're interested in learning stuff. It's a very good site. I do genuinely endorse it, so check it out. And thank you for listening. And to play us out, let's hear the lovely, warm, screechy tones of the rebroadcast sounds of the International Space Station, playing back sounds from all over Europe. That's it. I'll see you next time. Bye.
Fatal, lo que lo digo. Yo creo que se lo he dicho claro también, ¿no? No vaya a poner otros prácticas malos que también con lo que te digo, pero lo digo como lo siento. Como la puesta de fácil, ya nada.